man sitting on the cold concrete of Fifth Avenue wore layers of tattered clothing that barely protected him from the December wind cutting through Manhattan's financial district. His weathered hands clutched a cardboard sign with faded words, and passers-by hurried past without a second glance. To most, he was just another face in the growing homeless population of New York City. But beneath the grime and exhaustion lived a mind that once argued cases before appellate courts, a man who had lost everything and would eventually reclaim it all in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a man whose life trajectory defied every statistic, every expectation, and every assumption about homelessness in America. It's a story that sounds too extraordinary to be true, yet it happened. And yes, cameras were there to capture the moment that changed everything. Marcus Thompson grew up in a modest neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan during the 1980s. His mother, Patricia, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, while his father, Raymond, repaired cars in their garage for extra income. Money was always tight, but what the Thompson household lacked in material wealth, it compensated for with an unwavering belief in education. Patricia would often tell young Marcus that knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away from you. She was wrong about that, as Marcus would later discover, but her words planted a seed that would eventually save his life. Marcus showed an aptitude for debate and critical thinking early on. His high school teachers recognized something special, encouraging him to join the debate team where he excelled at constructing arguments and dismantling his opponent's positions. His economics teacher, Mr. Harrison, pulled him aside one afternoon during his junior year and told him something that would echo through his life. "You have the mind of a lawyer, Marcus. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But the path from Detroit's struggling neighborhoods to law school wasn't paved with gold. It was paved with sacrifice, late nights studying while his friends hung out, and the constant juggling of part-time jobs to save money for college. Marcus worked at a grocery store, bagging items and stocking shelves, often returning home past midnight to complete his homework. His grades never slipped. He graduated near the top of his class with a 3.9 GPA. The University of Michigan accepted Marcus for undergraduate studies, where he majored in political science. The campus was a different world, populated by students whose parents could afford to pay tuition without blinking. Marcus worked 3 jobs to stay afloat: tutoring freshmen, working in the library, and serving food at the campus cafeteria. He saw his classmates complain about minor inconveniences while he worried about whether he could afford textbooks. The man sitting on the cold concrete of Fifth Avenue wore layers of tattered clothing that barely protected him from the December wind cutting through Manhattan's financial district. His weathered hands clutched a cardboard sign with faded words, and passers-by hurried past without a second glance. To most, he was just another face in the growing homeless population of New York City. But beneath the grime and exhaustion lived a mind that once argued cases before appellate courts, a man who had lost everything and would eventually reclaim it all in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a man whose life trajectory defied every statistic, every expectation, and every assumption about homelessness in America. It's a story that sounds too extraordinary to be true, yet it happened. And yes, cameras were there to capture the moment that changed everything. Marcus Thompson grew up in a modest neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan during the 1980s. His mother, Patricia, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, while his father, Raymond, repaired cars in their garage for extra income. Money was always tight, but what the Thompson household lacked in material wealth, it compensated for with an unwavering belief in education. Patricia would often tell young Marcus that knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away from you. She was wrong about that, as Marcus would later discover, but her words planted a seed that would eventually save his life. Marcus showed an aptitude for debate and critical thinking early on. His high school teachers recognized something special, encouraging him to join the debate team where he excelled at constructing arguments and dismantling that would echo through his life. "You have the mind of a lawyer, Marcus. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But the path from Detroit's struggling neighborhoods to law school wasn't paved with gold. It was paved with sacrifice, late nights studying while his friends hung out, and the constant juggling of part-time jobs to save money for college. Marcus worked at a grocery store, bagging items and stocking shelves, often returning home past midnight to complete his homework. His grades never slipped. He graduated near the top of his class with a 3.9 GPA. The University of Michigan accepted Marcus for undergraduate studies, where he majored in political science. The campus was a different world, populated by students whose parents could afford to pay tuition without blinking. Marcus worked 3 jobs to stay afloat: tutoring freshmen, working in the library, and serving food at the campus cafeteria. He saw his classmates complain about minor inconveniences while he worried about whether he could afford textbooks. The news shattered everything. Marcus spiraled into depression, unable to process the cruel irony of his situation. He had worked his entire life to build something, and now that something was being torn away. The law firm, unable to accommodate his declining abilities, offered him a generous severance package and suggested he focus on his health. It was a kind way of saying goodbye. Angela tried to be supportive, but the strain proved too much for their marriage. Watching the man she loved deteriorate was unbearable. She felt guilty for her inability to cope, but the reality was overwhelming. They separated and eventually divorced. Marcus understood but still felt abandoned. The medical bills piled up. Experimental treatments and specialized care drained his savings faster than he could have imagined. His health insurance covered some costs but not everything. The medications that slowed the disease's progression were expensive. Marcus depleted his retirement accounts, sold his possessions, and eventually lost the Brooklyn apartment. He moved into a small studio in a less desirable neighborhood, then into a shared room in a boarding house, then into a shelter. Each step down felt like shedding another layer of his identity. The successful lawyer became the sick man, became the homeless person. The shelters were overcrowded and chaotic. Marcus struggled to sleep amid the noise and tension. His medications were stolen twice, forcing him to go without them for weeks. The disease progressed. His memory became increasingly unreliable. Some days were clearer than others, but the bad days outnumbered the good ones. Marcus ended up on the streets, joining the thousands of homeless individuals in New York City. He panhandled for money to buy food and the few medications he could afford. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had once walked these same streets in expensive suits, heading to court to argue million-dollar cases. Now he sat on those streets, invisible to the same people he used to work alongside. Winter was particularly brutal. The cold seeped into his bones, and finding warm places to sleep became a nightly struggle. Marcus frequently spent nights in the subway stations, riding trains back and forth just to stay out of the freezing temperatures. He grew thinner, his health deteriorating from malnutrition and lack of proper medical care. But even in his darkest moments, something inside Marcus refused to give up completely. On his clearer days, he would recite legal principles to himself, testing his memory against the disease, trying to erase it. He would think about cases he had worked on, arguments he had made, victories he had won. It was his way of fighting back, of holding on to the person he used to be. One particularly difficult morning, Marcus woke up in an alley behind a restaurant in the Lower East Side. His body ached, his stomach was empty, and his mind felt foggy. But it was one of those rare mornings when his thoughts were relatively clear. He decided to walk, not to any particular destination, just to move. He ended up near the courthouse where he had once argued cases. Standing across the street, Marcus watched lawyers in sharp suits walking up the steps, carrying briefcases and talking on their phones. They looked confident, purposeful, alive. He remembered what that felt like. A younger lawyer exited the building, fumbling with an armful of documents. Papers scattered across the sidewalk, and the man cursed under his breath. Marcus, almost without thinking, walked over and began helping collect the papers. The lawyer looked surprised, then grateful. "Thank you," the young man said, studying Marcus's weathered face. "That's very kind of you." Marcus nodded and started to walk away, but the lawyer called out, "Wait, have we met before? You look familiar." Marcus turned back, shaking his head. "I don't think so." The lawyer squinted, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You're Marcus Thompson, aren't you? From Wilson & Associates? I remember you from a conference about 5 years ago. You gave a presentation on appellate strategy that completely changed how I approached my cases." The moment hung in the air. Marcus felt a rush of emotions: shame, pride, loss, hope. "That was a long time ago," Marcus said quietly. The lawyer, whose name was David Chin, didn't press for details about what had happened. Instead, he did something unexpected. He invited Marcus to get coffee. At first, Marcus declined, but David insisted, sensing that this was more than a chance encounter. Over coffee, Marcus found himself telling his story. The diagnosis, the collapse of his career, the loss of everything. David listened without judgment, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When Marcus finished, David sat in silence for a long moment. "I can help you," David finally said. "But you have to let me." David Chin had founded a small nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal services to homeless individuals. He had seen firsthand how the legal system failed the most vulnerable, and he was determined to make a difference. He had never imagined he would encounter Marcus Thompson, a lawyer he had once admired, living on the streets. David connected Marcus with a medical clinic that specialized in treating homeless patients. They adjusted his medications and helped him access programs he didn't know existed. The fog in his mind began to lift slightly. The disease was still there, still progressing, but the proper treatment slowed it down and gave Marcus clearer moments more frequently. David also helped Marcus secure housing in a transitional facility for homeless individuals working to rebuild their lives. It wasn't much, just a small room with a bed and a desk, but it was warm and safe. For the first time in years, Marcus had stability. But the most important thing David offered wasn't medical care or housing. It was purpose. David invited Marcus to volunteer at his legal aid clinic. At first, Marcus was hesitant. His memory was still unreliable and he worried about making mistakes. But David assured him that they would start small, just helping with intake interviews and basic legal research. Marcus discovered something remarkable. When he focused on helping others with their legal problems, his mind sharpened. The legal knowledge he thought he had lost was still there, buried beneath the fog of disease but accessible when he concentrated. It was as if his brain had carved out a protected space for the legal training that had defined so much of his life. He started spending more time at the clinic, working with clients who faced eviction, wrongful arrests, unpaid wages, and countless other legal challenges. Marcus understood their struggles in ways other lawyers couldn't. He had lived on those same streets, experienced the same desperation, felt the same invisibility. His empathy was profound, and his legal expertise, even diminished, was still formidable. Clients responded to him. They trusted him because he wasn't just another lawyer in a nice suit who couldn't possibly understand what they were going through. He had been where they were. Word spread about the homeless lawyer at David's clinic who was helping people win cases. Local news picked up the story, fascinated by the narrative of redemption and resilience. Marcus was reluctant to be in the spotlight, but David convinced him that his story could inspire others and bring attention to the issues facing homeless individuals. The media attention brought unexpected opportunities. A prominent law professor at Columbia remembered Marcus from his law school days and reached out. They met for lunch, and the professor was shocked by what Marcus had endured. But he was also impressed by Marcus's determination to rebuild his life. The professor connected Marcus with a program that provided pro bono legal services to underserved communities. They offered Marcus a part-time position as a consultant, recognizing that his unique perspective and experience were valuable despite his medical condition. Marcus's life began to change in ways he hadn't dared to imagine during those desperate nights on the streets. The work was demanding, but it was also fulfilling in a way his corporate law career had never been. He wasn't making six figures anymore, but he was making a difference. 2 years after his chance encounter with David Chin, Marcus applied to reinstate his law license, which had been suspended due to his circumstances. It was a complicated process requiring extensive documentation of his current health status and capabilities. The Bar Association's Character and Fitness Committee interviewed him multiple times, concerned about his ability to practice law effectively. Marcus was honest about his limitations. He explained that while his memory was impaired, he had developed systems to compensate. He kept detailed notes, worked with colleagues who could verify his work, and focused on areas of law where his experience and judgment mattered more than raw memorization. The committee deliberated for months. Finally, they issued their decision. Marcus's license was reinstated with certain conditions. He would need regular medical evaluations and supervision in his legal work. But he was, once again, an attorney in good standing. The moment Marcus received that news, he broke down and cried. It wasn't just about the license. It was about reclaiming his identity, proving that his life still had value and purpose despite everything he had lost. But the most extraordinary chapter of Marcus Thompson's story was yet to come. Marcus continued working with David's legal aid clinic and taking on pro bono cases through the Columbia program. His reputation grew not as the corporate lawyer he once was, but as an advocate for people society had forgotten. Judges noticed him in court, impressed by his dedication and the obvious respect his clients showed him. One of those judges was Justice Helen Rodriguez, who presided over the family court in Manhattan. She had encountered Marcus multiple times, always representing clients facing desperate situations. Single mothers fighting to keep their children, men trying to regain custody after getting sober, families on the brink of collapse. What struck Justice Rodriguez wasn't just Marcus's legal competence but his genuine compassion. He treated every case as if it were the most important thing in the world because to his clients, it was. She learned about his background, his struggle with homelessness, his ongoing battle with early-onset Alzheimer's. She was profoundly moved. Justice Rodriguez was approaching retirement, and the process of selecting her replacement was underway. Judges in New York can be either elected or appointed, depending on the court level and circumstances. In this case, the position would be filled through appointment by a judicial screening committee, with final approval from the mayor. Justice Rodriguez did something unprecedented. She personally recommended Marcus Thompson for her position. The recommendation shocked everyone. Marcus had only recently reinstated his law license. He was dealing with a serious medical condition. He had been homeless just a few years earlier. By conventional standards, he was not a viable candidate for judgeship. But Justice Rodriguez argued that conventional standards had failed the very people the court was supposed to serve. She pointed out that Marcus understood poverty, addiction, mental illness, and homelessness in ways most judges never would. He had lived through them. His empathy was earned, not theoretical. The Judicial Screening Committee was skeptical. They interviewed Marcus extensively, questioning him about his health, his competence, and his qualifications. Marcus was transparent about everything. He acknowledged his limitations but also demonstrated his strengths. He explained how his experiences had given him insights that couldn't be learned from textbooks or prestigious clerkships. The committee members were divided. Some argued that appointing Marcus would set a dangerous precedent. Others countered that diversity on the bench shouldn't just mean demographic diversity but also diversity of life experience. The debates were heated and passionate. Meanwhile, news of Marcus's nomination leaked to the press. The story exploded. Here was a man who had gone from homeless to potentially becoming a judge, a trajectory so unlikely it seemed like fiction. Media outlets ran features on Marcus's life. Opinion pieces debated whether someone with his background should serve on the bench. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. People were tired of judges who seemed disconnected from the realities ordinary citizens faced. They wanted someone who understood struggle, who had compassion born from personal experience. Petitions supporting Marcus's appointment gathered thousands of signatures. But there was also backlash. Critics argued that Marcus's medical condition made him unfit to serve. They questioned whether someone who had been homeless could have the judgment necessary to decide cases. Some comments were cruel, suggesting that Marcus was being used as a publicity stunt rather than being evaluated on merit. Marcus found the attention overwhelming. He had never sought fame or recognition. He just wanted to help people and rebuild his life. The scrutiny was intense, every aspect of his past examined and debated. But David Chin and his other supporters rallied around him, providing encouragement and reminding him why this mattered. After months of deliberation, the Judicial Screening Committee made their decision. By a narrow margin, they approved Marcus Thompson's nomination. The final step was approval from the mayor, which came 2 weeks later. Marcus Thompson would become a judge. The day of Marcus's swearing-in ceremony was cold but clear, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes New York City feel almost magical. The courthouse was packed with people who had come to witness this extraordinary moment. His mother, Patricia, now elderly but still sharp, sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She had never stopped believing in her son, even when he had stopped believing in himself. David Chin was there, along with many of the clients Marcus had helped over the years. Former colleagues from Wilson and Associates attended, some out of genuine support, others out of curiosity. News cameras lined the back of the room, capturing every moment. Marcus stood before the assembly in a new suit that David had helped him purchase. He looked different from the weathered man who had panhandled on Fifth Avenue just 3 years earlier. But the journey showed in his eyes, in the weight of everything he had survived and overcome. As he placed his hand on the Bible and took the oath of office, Marcus thought about all the people who had helped him reach this moment. Mr. Harrison, his high school teacher who first called him a lawyer. His parents who sacrificed so much for his education. Angela, who loved him even when he was falling apart. David Chin, who saw someone worth saving when everyone else saw just another homeless person. Justice Rodriguez, who believed that his experiences made him exactly the kind of judge the system needed. The audience erupted in applause as Marcus completed the oath. He was now Judge Marcus Thompson, one of the most unlikely success stories in the American legal system. In his first speech as a judge, Marcus addressed the room with a voice that was steady despite the emotion coursing through him. "I stand before you as living proof that we are more than our worst moments, more than our circumstances, more than the labels society places on us. 3 years ago I was homeless, sick, and had lost everything. Today I am a judge. That transformation didn't happen because I'm special or exceptional. It happened because people refused to give up on me when I had given up on myself." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I know what it's like to be invisible. To walk past people who won't make eye contact because acknowledging your existence is uncomfortable. To be treated as less than human because you don't have an address or a job. That experience will inform every decision I make from this bench. I will remember that behind every case is a human being deserving of dignity, respect, and justice." Marcus spoke about the systemic failures that lead people into homelessness, the lack of support for those with mental illness, the way poverty becomes a trap that's nearly impossible to escape. He promised to bring that understanding to his judicial decisions, to look beyond the surface of cases and see the complex human realities beneath. "Justice cannot be blind to suffering," Marcus said. "It must see clearly, understand deeply, and act with compassion while upholding the law. That's the kind of judge I aspire to be." The response was overwhelming. Standing ovation after standing ovation echoed through the courthouse. Many in the audience were crying, including some of the seasoned judges who had initially opposed Marcus's appointment. Marcus's work as a judge quickly proved that the confidence placed in him was not misplaced. He brought a unique perspective to family court, handling cases involving child custody, foster care, domestic violence, and other sensitive family matters. His decisions were thoughtful, balancing legal requirements with deep understanding of the social issues affecting the families before him. In one early case, Marcus presided over a custody dispute involving a father who had recently become homeless after losing his job. The mother's attorney argued that the father's housing instability made him unfit for custody. Marcus listened carefully to both sides, then issued a ruling that shocked the courtroom. He granted the father temporary custody on the condition that he accept support services. Marcus personally connected the father with programs that could help him find housing and employment. 3 months later, the father had an apartment and a job. The family, while no longer together, found a way to co-parent effectively. "I could have taken the easy route and ruled against that father," Marcus explained later. "But I understood what he was going through. Homelessness doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a person who needs help. My job is to protect children, but also to support families in crisis, not tear them apart unnecessarily." Marcus's approach wasn't always popular with colleagues who preferred more traditional methods. Some criticized him for being too lenient, for letting his personal experiences cloud his judgment. But the data supported his decisions. Families that came through his court had higher rates of stability and lower rates of repeat legal issues. He became known for conducting thorough hearings, asking questions others didn't think to ask, and finding creative solutions within the boundaries of the law. Marcus never forgot what it felt like to have the system fail him, and he was determined not to let it fail others if he could prevent it. His medical condition remained a challenge. There were days when the fog descended and Marcus struggled to process information. He developed systems to manage it, detailed note-taking, recording sessions so he could review them later, and honest communication with his law clerks about when he needed support. The Bar Association's Oversight Committee monitored his performance and found no issues that warranted concern. Marcus's story inspired countless people struggling with their own challenges. He received letters from across the country, from people experiencing homelessness, from those with Alzheimer's in their families, from anyone who felt the system had failed them. He tried to respond to as many as possible, offering encouragement and practical advice. A documentary filmmaker approached Marcus about telling his story in depth. Initially reluctant, Marcus eventually agreed, recognizing that visibility could bring attention to the issues he cared about. The documentary, titled From Streets to Bench, One Judge's Journey, premiered 2 years into Marcus's judgeship and became a sensation. The film didn't shy away from the difficult moments. It showed Marcus on bad days when his memory failed, when he struggled to find words, when the weight of everything threatened to overwhelm him. But it also showed his triumphs, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to justice. Critics praised it as a powerful portrait of resilience and redemption. The documentary's success brought even more attention to Marcus and the causes he championed. He used his platform to advocate for better services for homeless individuals, increased funding for mental health treatment, and reforms to make the legal system more accessible to vulnerable populations. Marcus spoke at conferences, universities, and community centers. He shared his story not for personal glory but to humanize the people society tends to overlook. Every speech ended with the same message: If you see someone struggling, don't look away. Help them. You might be saving the next judge, the next teacher, the next person who will change the world. We are all one crisis away from needing that same compassion. 5 years into his judgeship, Marcus received an honor that nearly broke him emotionally. Columbia Law School, his alma mater, invited him to deliver the commencement address to the graduating class. Standing at the same institution where he had once struggled as a student, where his dreams had begun, Marcus looked out at the sea of faces in graduation robes. "You are graduating from one of the finest law schools in the world," Marcus began. "You have brilliant legal minds and bright futures ahead. But I want to challenge you to remember something as you begin your careers. The law exists to serve people, not the other way around. The people who need the law most are often the ones least able to access it." He spoke about the clients he served at David's Legal Aid Clinic, about the homeless individuals who couldn't navigate the legal system designed to help them, about the families in crisis who needed lawyers but couldn't afford them. "Some of you will go to prestigious firms and make a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with that," Marcus continued. "But I urge you to remember your obligation to give back, to use your skills for those who cannot pay for them. Pro bono work isn't charity. It's justice. And justice is what we swore to uphold when we chose this profession." He concluded with a personal note. "I once had everything this world told me mattered. A successful career, financial security, respect. Then I lost it all and found myself on the streets with nothing. That experience taught me that our worth isn't measured by our accomplishments or our bank accounts. It's measured by how we treat each other, especially those who have the least. You have the power to change lives. Use it wisely. Use it with compassion. And never ever forget that any one of us is just one crisis away from needing the help we're so quick to judge others for seeking." The graduates gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Many were in tears. Several approached him afterward, promising to dedicate part of their careers to public service. Marcus hoped they would keep those promises. Marcus Thompson's transformation from homeless to judge became a case study in law schools, social work programs, and public policy courses across the country. Scholars analyzed what factors enabled his recovery, what systems failed him, and what lessons could be learned. The consensus was that while Marcus's story was extraordinary, it highlighted ordinary problems that affected millions. The lack of adequate mental health care, the devastating impact of medical debt, the insufficient support for people experiencing homelessness, the tendency of society to write off people who fall on hard times. Marcus's story put a human face on all of these issues. He continued to serve on the bench with distinction, earning respect even from those who had initially doubted him. His rulings were cited in other courts, particularly in cases involving vulnerable populations. Legal scholars praised his ability to balance empathy with rigorous legal analysis. But Marcus never let success go to his head. He remained connected to his roots, volunteering at David's Legal Aid Clinic when his schedule allowed, mentoring young lawyers interested in public service, and advocating tirelessly for systemic reforms. His relationship with his mother deepened during these years. Patricia had never stopped believing in her son, and watching him overcome so much filled her with pride beyond measure. She attended many of his court sessions, sitting quietly in the gallery and marveling at the man he had become. Marcus also reconnected with some old friends who had lost touch during his darkest years. Some relationships were rebuilt, others couldn't be salvaged, but Marcus found peace with all of it. He understood that people have their limits, that watching someone self-destruct is painful, and that forgiveness goes both ways. He even had a brief conversation with his ex-wife Angela, who reached out after seeing the documentary. They met for coffee and she apologized for leaving when he needed her most. Marcus told her there was nothing to apologize for, that she had done what she needed to survive. They parted on good terms, two people who had loved each other once and were glad to see each other doing well now. Romantically, Marcus remained single. His focus was entirely on his work and managing his health. The disease continued its slow progression, but the medications and cognitive exercises kept it at bay better than doctors had initially predicted. They told Marcus that staying mentally active through his judicial work was likely helping preserve his cognitive function. "It's like you're exercising your brain every day," one neurologist explained. "That seems to be slowing the deterioration." Marcus found that darkly humorous. The thing that was killing him, his brain, was being kept alive by the very work that required his brain to function. It was a race against time, and Marcus was determined to make every moment count. 8 years into his judgeship, as Marcus approached his 50th birthday, he reflected on everything that had happened. From the heights of success to the depths of despair and back again. Most people never experience such extremes. Marcus had lived multiple lifetimes in one. He thought about the moment that changed everything, helping that young lawyer pick up his scattered papers near the courthouse. Such a small act, but it led to everything that followed. It made Marcus believe in the power of seemingly insignificant moments, in the butterfly effect of kindness. At a judicial conference, a young lawyer approached Marcus nervously. She explained that she had been homeless as a teenager, had somehow made it through college and law school, and was now working as a public defender. She had seen the documentary about Marcus and wanted to thank him for showing her that people like them could succeed despite their past. "People tell me all the time that I should be ashamed of where I came from," she said, her voice breaking. "But you taught me that our scars make us better lawyers, better advocates. We understand things other people can't." Marcus hugged her, fighting back his own tears. "Never be ashamed," he told her. "The world needs lawyers who understand struggle. Keep fighting for people who need you." That interaction reminded Marcus why his story mattered. It wasn't about him. It was about everyone who had been told they were worthless, that their circumstances defined them, that they should give up. His existence proved them wrong. Marcus continued serving on the bench, his reputation growing with each passing year. He was invited to serve on advisory committees studying homelessness and judicial reform. His voice carried weight because he spoke from experience, not theory. One of his proudest accomplishments was helping establish a specialized court program for homeless individuals facing minor criminal charges. The program connected defendants with social services, housing assistance, and mental health care instead of simply punishing them. The recidivism rate dropped dramatically, and other jurisdictions began adopting similar programs. "We have to stop treating poverty like a crime," Marcus said during the program's launch. "These are people who need help, not punishment. The criminal justice system should be our last resort, not our first response." The program faced criticism from those who believed in tough-on-crime approaches, but the data was undeniable. It was more effective and more cost-efficient to help people address the root causes of their behavior than to simply cycle them through jails and courts repeatedly. Marcus also pushed for reforms in how courts handled cases involving people with mental illness. Too often, he argued, the legal system failed to recognize when someone's actions were driven by untreated psychiatric conditions. He advocated for better integration between courts and mental health services. His efforts didn't always succeed. Bureaucracy and politics stood in the way of many reforms he supported. But Marcus kept pushing, using his position and his story to bring attention to issues that others found easier to ignore. As his 10th year as a judge approached, Marcus began experiencing more frequent memory lapses and cognitive difficulties. The disease was progressing despite the medications and his active lifestyle. He knew his time on the bench was limited. Marcus consulted with his doctors and the Bar Association's Oversight Committee. They conducted extensive evaluations of his current capabilities. The results were sobering. While Marcus could still function as a judge, it was becoming increasingly difficult, and the trajectory was concerning. Marcus made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He announced his retirement from the bench, effective at the end of the judicial term. He was only 52 years old, but he refused to remain in a position where he couldn't give it his full capability. "I have given this job everything I have," Marcus said at his retirement announcement. "But I owe it to the people who come before my court to step down before my condition affects my ability to serve them properly. This decision breaks my heart, but it's the right one." The response was overwhelming. Fellow judges, lawyers, community advocates, and former clients flooded Marcus with messages of gratitude and support. Plans were made for a retirement ceremony that turned into a celebration of everything Marcus had accomplished. The courthouse was packed once again, just as it had been for his swearing-in ceremony a decade earlier. But this time the mood was bittersweet. People were proud of Marcus but sad to see him go. Justice Helen Rodriguez, now fully retired herself, spoke at the ceremony. 10 years ago, I recommended Marcus Thompson for this position against considerable opposition, she said. I was told he wasn't qualified, that his circumstances made him unsuitable, that I was making a mistake. I'm here today to say that appointing Marcus Thompson as a judge was not just the right decision. It was one of the best decisions this judicial system has ever made. She detailed the impact Marcus had made, the lives he had changed, the precedents he had set. She spoke about his compassion, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to justice even as his own health declined. Marcus showed us that empathy isn't weakness, Justice Rodriguez concluded. It's strength. And that the best judges aren't always the ones with the most impressive credentials, but the ones with the deepest understanding of the people they serve. When Marcus took the podium for his final remarks as a judge, he looked out at the crowd and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "When I was homeless, living on the streets, I thought my life was over," Marcus began. "I thought I had nothing left to offer the world. But this job, this opportunity to serve, gave me back my purpose. It gave me back my life." He talked about the privilege of sitting on the bench, of being trusted with decisions that affected families and individuals in their most vulnerable moments. He expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported him, from David Chin, who first reached out, to Justice Rodriguez, who believed in him, to the countless colleagues and staff who helped him succeed. "If there's one thing I want people to remember from my time as a judge, it's this: every person has value. Every single one. The homeless man on the corner, the woman struggling with addiction, the father who lost his job and his home. They all have inherent dignity and worth. Our job as a society is to recognize that worth and create systems that help people rather than discard them. I was discarded. The system failed me in countless ways. But people, individual people who chose compassion over indifference, saved me. David Chin, who stopped to actually see me. Justice Rodriguez, who looked past conventional qualifications. The medical professionals who treated me when I couldn't pay. Every single person who refused to accept that my story had to end in tragedy." He looked directly at the cameras in the back of the room. "If you're watching this and you're struggling, if you think you've hit bottom and there's no way up, I want you to know something. Your story isn't over. The chapter you're in right now doesn't define the whole book. Keep fighting. Accept help when it's offered. And remember that the darkest moments can lead to the most incredible transformations." The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. People weren't ready to let go, to accept that Marcus's time as a judge was ending. But Marcus felt at peace with his decision. He had given everything he had to this work, and now it was time to step aside. In retirement, Marcus dedicated himself to advocacy and education. He wrote a book about his experiences titled Invisible No More: A Judge's Journey from Streets to Justice. The book became a bestseller, resonating with readers across all demographics. People were drawn to the raw honesty with which Marcus described his lowest moments and the hope embedded in his recovery. He gave talks at prisons, shelters, schools, and conferences. Anywhere people would listen, Marcus shared his message about the importance of compassion, second chances, and systemic reform. He became a prominent voice in national conversations about homelessness and criminal justice. Marcus also continued working with David Chen's legal aid clinic as a consultant and mentor, though his declining health limited his involvement. The cognitive exercises that came with legal work still seemed to help slow the disease's progression, giving Marcus a few more good years than doctors had initially predicted. But the reality of early-onset Alzheimer's meant that Marcus knew his time was limited. The disease was undefeated in the end, just temporarily held at bay. Marcus made peace with that. He had already lived far longer and accomplished far more than seemed possible when he received his diagnosis. He spent time with his mother, now in her 80s but still sharp and proud of her son. They talked about his childhood, about the dreams she had for him, about how those dreams had died and been reborn in forms she never imagined. "You became something better than I dreamed," Patricia told him one afternoon as they sat in the small garden outside her assisted living facility. "Not just a successful lawyer but a good man who helped people. That's worth more than any title or salary." Marcus held her hand and told her that everything good in him came from her, from the values she instilled and the sacrifices she made. It was one of many conversations they had in those years, each one precious because they both knew the clock was ticking. Marcus also reconnected with his faith, which he had abandoned during his darkest years. He wasn't sure what he believed anymore, but he found comfort in the rituals and community of the church his mother attended. He liked the idea that his suffering had served a purpose, that his pain had been transformed into something meaningful. 12 years after that chance encounter with David Chin outside the courthouse, 14 years after sleeping in alleys and subway cars, Marcus Thompson's health took a sharp decline. The Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where his lucid moments became rare. He moved into a specialized care facility where medical staff could monitor him around the clock. David Chin visited regularly, as did many of the people whose lives Marcus had touched. They shared stories, looked at photos, reminded Marcus of the impact he had made. On his better days, Marcus smiled and engaged with the memories. On his worst days, he didn't recognize anyone. But even in decline, Marcus maintained a kind of dignity. The staff at the facility noticed something remarkable. When Marcus's legal training was triggered, even unconsciously, his mind seemed to sharpen. If they mentioned a legal concept or read him a case summary, he would sometimes emerge from the fog and engage with clarity that shocked everyone. It was as if decades of legal education and practice had carved such deep neural pathways that even Alzheimer's couldn't completely erase them. Those pathways gave Marcus windows of clarity even as the rest of his mind deteriorated. One afternoon, a young social worker at the facility sat with Marcus, who was having a particularly bad day. She had been struggling with her own challenges, feeling overwhelmed by the cases she was managing, questioning whether she was making any difference. She started talking to Marcus about one of her cases, a family in crisis that reminded her of situations Marcus had dealt with as a judge. She didn't expect him to respond. He hadn't been lucid in days. But as she described the case, something shifted in Marcus's expression. His eyes focused and he began asking questions. Specific, pointed questions about the details of the case. The social worker, stunned, answered him. Marcus listened carefully, then offered advice that was both legally sound and deeply compassionate. The conversation lasted about 15 minutes before Marcus's clarity faded again, but it left the social worker in tears. She had needed guidance, and somehow, even diminished by disease, Marcus had provided it. Stories like that became common at the facility. Marcus, even in his decline, continued touching lives in small but profound ways. It was as if his purpose, his drive to help others, existed at such a fundamental level that not even Alzheimer's could completely suppress it. As the end approached, Marcus was surrounded by the people who mattered most. His mother, frail but present, held his hand. David Chin was there, along with Justice Rodriguez and several other judges who had served with Marcus. Former clients came to say goodbye, people whose lives Marcus had changed in ways both large and small. In his final lucid moment, Marcus looked at his mother and said something that would be repeated at his memorial service weeks later. "I got to be a judge, Mama. Can you believe that? Your son, the boy from Detroit who bagged groceries and worked 3 jobs, became a judge." Patricia smiled through her tears. "I always knew you would be something special. I just didn't know it would be this." Marcus Thompson died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by love and remembered by thousands. He was 54 years old. His death made national news. Tributes poured in from across the country, from people he had helped directly and from countless others who had been inspired by his story. The governor ordered flags lowered to half-staff, an honor rarely given to a family court judge but fitting for someone who had transcended the typical boundaries of the position. The memorial service was held at the courthouse where Marcus had served. It was standing room only, with overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms. Speakers included fellow judges, lawyers Marcus had worked with, clients whose lives he had changed, and advocates who had fought alongside him for reform. David Chin delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking multiple times as he recounted finding Marcus outside the courthouse that day, recognizing someone society had rendered invisible. Marcus Thompson's life was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, David said. But more than that, it was an indictment of systems that fail our most vulnerable and a blueprint for how we can do better. Marcus didn't just overcome homelessness. He transformed it into wisdom, into empathy, into a judicial philosophy that prioritized human dignity above all else. He spoke about the reforms Marcus had championed, the lives he had saved, the precedents he had set. But he also spoke about Marcus the person. His laugh, his determination, his refusal to let disease rob him of purpose. "We mourn today not just a judge but a revolutionary," David concluded. "Someone who showed us that our worst circumstances don't define our ultimate worth, that redemption is always possible, and that the measure of a society is how it treats those who have fallen." Marcus Thompson rose from the streets to the bench, and in doing so, he lifted all of us with him. Justice Rodriguez spoke next, recounting her controversial decision to nominate Marcus and how he had exceeded every expectation. "I was criticized for recommending Marcus," she said. "People told me I was being sentimental, that I was letting emotion cloud my judgment. But appointing Marcus Thompson was not an emotional decision. It was a recognition that our justice system needed someone who understood injustice intimately, someone who had experienced firsthand how our institutions fail vulnerable people. Marcus brought that understanding to every case. He made the bench more just simply by being on it." Former clients spoke about specific moments when Marcus had seen their humanity when everyone else saw only problems. A father who regained custody of his children after getting sober credited Marcus with treating him like a person, not a statistic. A mother fighting to keep her family together while dealing with mental illness described how Marcus had connected her with resources that saved her life. "Judge Thompson didn't just rule on our cases," one client said. "He believed in us when we had stopped believing in ourselves. He showed us that our past mistakes weren't the end of our story." How many judges do that? The service lasted nearly 3 hours, with dozens of people sharing memories and tributes. When it finally concluded, the crowd filed past Marcus's casket, many leaving flowers, notes, and small tokens of appreciation. Marcus was buried next to his father in a cemetery in Detroit, returning home to the place where his journey began. His gravestone bore a simple inscription chosen by his mother, "Judge Marcus Thompson, he saw the invisible and served with compassion." In the months and years following Marcus's death, his legacy continued to grow. Law schools incorporated his story into their curricula, using it to teach future lawyers about empathy, resilience, and the importance of pro bono work. The Marcus Thompson Fellowship was established to support law students from disadvantaged backgrounds, ensuring that people like him continued entering the profession. The specialized court program Marcus helped create for homeless individuals expanded to other cities. Research showed it was remarkably effective at breaking cycles of poverty and incarceration, vindicating Marcus's belief that compassion and support were more effective than punishment. His book remained a bestseller, required reading in many social work and law programs. The documentary about his life was updated with footage from his memorial service and final years, turning it into a comprehensive portrait of an extraordinary life. But perhaps Marcus's greatest legacy was less tangible. He changed how people thought about homelessness, about mental illness, about second chances. He proved that society's discards could become its most valuable contributors. He showed that empathy wasn't just a nice ideal but a practical necessity for a functioning justice system. The young lawyer Marcus had helped that day outside the courthouse, David Chin, continued running the legal aid clinic that had been Marcus's lifeline. The clinic expanded significantly after Marcus's death, buoyed by donations inspired by his story. David named the clinic the Marcus Thompson Legal Justice Center, ensuring that Marcus's name would be associated with helping vulnerable people for generations to come. At the clinic's entrance, there's a photograph of Marcus from his days as a judge. But next to it is another photograph, one taken by a journalist who had captured Marcus sitting on the street, holding his cardboard sign, just weeks before his encounter with David. The two images side by side tell the complete story: where Marcus had been and where he went, the journey from invisible to invaluable. People visit the clinic specifically to see those photographs, to remind themselves that transformation is possible, that society's judgments about who has value and who doesn't are often catastrophically wrong, and that the person society ignores today might be the person who changes the world tomorrow. Marcus Thompson's story resonates because it's simultaneously unique and universal. Unique in the specific details of his journey from homeless to judge, universal in the themes of struggle, redemption, and the power of human connection. Everyone has experienced moments of failure, of feeling invisible, of wondering if their life still has purpose. Marcus's story says yes, emphatically yes, your life has purpose even in your darkest moment. Years after his death, Marcus's influence continues appearing in unexpected places. A Supreme Court justice, in a dissenting opinion about treatment of homeless individuals, cited Marcus's work and philosophy. Politicians advocating for criminal justice reform invoked his name. Social workers facing burnout remembered his story and found renewed purpose. His mother, Patricia, lived another 3 years after Marcus's death, long enough to see the Marcus Thompson Legal Justice Center's official opening and the scholarship fund established in his name award its first recipients. She spoke at both events, her pride in her son undiminished by grief. "Marcus used to tell me that I was wrong when I said no one could take away what you learn," Patricia said at the scholarship ceremony. "His disease tried to take away everything he knew. But it couldn't take away who he was at his core. A man who believed in justice, in compassion, in the inherent dignity of every human being. That core remained until the very end." The scholarship recipients that year included a young woman who had been homeless as a child and was now headed to law school, and a man who had spent time in prison and was determined to become a public defender. They were living proof that Marcus's story wasn't just inspiring, it was replicable. Others could follow similar paths if given the chance and support. The story of Marcus Thompson from homeless to judge became shorthand for the possibility of redemption and transformation. When people talked about second chances, his name came up. When advocates pushed for reforms to help vulnerable populations, they cited his example. When anyone suggested that people experiencing homelessness were beyond help, someone inevitably mentioned Judge Marcus Thompson. But those who knew Marcus best understood that his story wasn't really about going from homeless to judge. It was about maintaining dignity and purpose regardless of circumstances. Marcus was valuable when he was on the streets before anyone recognized it. The judgeship didn't give him worth. It gave him a platform to demonstrate the worth he always had. That distinction mattered to Marcus and matters to his legacy. The message isn't that homeless people should all become judges to have value. It's that homeless people, like all people, already have value that society often fails to recognize. Marcus's journey from invisible to celebrated simply made visible what had always been true. His life raised uncomfortable questions that society still grapples with. How many potential judges, doctors, teachers, and leaders are currently sleeping in shelters or on streets, their potential untapped because they lack support? How many Marcus Thompsons never get their chance encounter with someone who sees them? These questions drove much of the advocacy work done in Marcus's name. Organizations fighting homelessness used his story to humanize the issue, to put a face on statistics that otherwise seemed abstract. It's easier to ignore 15,000 homeless people than to ignore Marcus Thompson, the man who went from sleeping in subway cars to presiding over court. The videos of Marcus's swearing-in ceremony and retirement speech remained among the most watched legal proceedings online. Millions of people saw them, many moved to tears by the visible emotion as Marcus took his oath and later said goodbye. Those videos captured something profound about human resilience and the possibility of transformation. Comment sections filled with personal stories. People shared their own struggles with homelessness, addiction, mental illness, and recovery. They talked about Marcus giving them hope, showing them that their current circumstances didn't define their future. Some credited his story with literally saving their lives, giving them reason to keep fighting when they wanted to give up. Teachers showed the videos to students, using Marcus's story to talk about empathy, judgment, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. Parents shared them with teenagers, hoping to instill values of compassion and perseverance. The story transcended its specifics and became a parable about human potential and the obligation to help others. Marcus Thompson never set out to be an inspiration or a symbol. He was just trying to survive, then trying to rebuild, then trying to serve others who faced the same struggles he had. But in doing so, authentically and without pretension, he became exactly the inspiration the world needed. His story proved that the arc of a life isn't predetermined by its middle chapters. The man sleeping on Fifth Avenue wasn't destined to die there. He was destined to become a judge, to change lives, to leave a legacy that would outlive him. But that destiny only became reality because people chose compassion over indifference, because systems were flexible enough to accommodate someone unconventional, and because Marcus himself refused to surrender to despair. Today, when advocates fight for increased funding for homeless services, they talk about Marcus Thompson. When lawmakers debate criminal justice reform, someone mentions his specialized court program. When law students question whether they should pursue lucrative corporate careers or meaningful public service, they remember the judge who found his greatest success serving those society had forgotten. Marcus Thompson, the boy from Detroit who bagged groceries, the corporate lawyer who lost everything, the homeless man who panhandled for survival, the judge who revolutionized how courts treat vulnerable populations. All of these were the same person and all of them mattered. The tragedy is that it took becoming a judge for society to see his worth. The triumph is that he lived long enough to prove that worth on the grandest stage possible. His story will endure because it speaks to something fundamental about the human experience. Our capacity for both failure and transcendence, our need for connection and support, our responsibility to lift others up when they fall. Marcus Thompson rose from the streets to the bench, yes, but more importantly he reminded everyone watching that people don't need to be judges to matter, that every person sleeping rough tonight has inherent dignity and worth, and that a society is measured not by how it treats its most successful members but by how it treats those who have fallen. That was Marcus Thompson's true legacy. Not the robe or the gavel or the title, but the simple, radical insistence that every human life has value and deserves a chance at redemption. He proved it by living it, and in doing so, he changed not just individual lives but the conversation itself about who deserves help and second chances in America. The video footage that captured key moments of Marcus's journey, from homeless to judge, from struggling to thriving, serves as permanent testimony to the truth he embodied. Transformation is possible, compassion matters, and we are all more than our worst moments. Judge Marcus Thompson showed us that. And the world is better for having witnessed it.